Is besig om voor te berei. Ek het my foon afskakel. Okay, I just need to switch my phone off. Daar's hy. Okay, 100%. Kill that. Right, good morning, everybody. Sorry, it took a while just to get a couple of settings done. My apologies. We've really been battling with this connection, so we need to possibly change the code to join the meeting. We'll see what happens. We're going to test and try and get things finalized and smooth out this morning. Let's just bow our heads in prayer, please. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for each person here. Thank you for the wonderful privilege we have to expose ourselves to the growth of this church and the role that Ellen White and James White played in this whole process. May we be blessed this morning in your name. Amen. Right. I was very, very impressed when I read, I just want to get into my notes. That has now disappeared. I'll have to draw them up again. Excuse me. Here we are. Right. I was very impressed when I read the letter that Ellen White quotes that she wrote to Sister Howland. That is the end of page 98. And I just want to go back half a page, and I would like to read this letter and share that with you. I feel thankful that I can now have my children with me under my own watch care and can better train them in the right way for the weeks that I have felt a hungering and a thirsting for salvation, and we've enjoyed almost uninterrupted communion with God. That really impressed me, this thirsting for salvation and enjoying this uninterrupted communion with God. Now this, she quotes after they've gone through this very difficult period where they prayed 3 times a day for James's recovery. And this whole process brought them closer to the Lord, which is absolutely unbelievable. I want to read the rest of this letter. Why do we stay away from the fountain when we can come and drink? Why do we die for bread when there is a storehouse full? It is rich and free. O my soul, feast upon it, and daily drink in heavenly joys. I will not hold my peace. The praise of God is in my heart and upon my lips. And we can rejoice in the fullness of our Savior's love. We can feast upon his excellent glory. My soul testifies to this. My gloom has been dispersed by this precious light, and I can never forget it. Remember, the context here is they've just gone through this difficult health issue with James, which brought them very much closer to God. They fell on their knees at least 3 times a day, just like Daniel did, by the way. My gloom has been dispersed by this precious light, and I can never forget it. Lord, help me to keep it in lively remembrance. So what she's saying here is the privilege that she had, that she and her husband had, because of his illness, to get closer to the Lord, is just, they're just so thankful for this. Awake all the energies of my soul, awake and adore thy Redeemer for his wondrous love. And then she carries on, souls around us must be aroused and saved. Now, once again, I'm going to interrupt my reading here. This is their primary focus. Their own food on the table, if they have potatoes or not, they're not perturbed about that. Souls around us must be aroused and saved, or they will perish. Not a moment have we to lose. We all have an influence that tells for the truth or against it. And I desire to carry with me unmistakable evidences that I am one of Christ's disciples. That is a wonderful thought. We all need to be able to say, today I would like to have people see Christ in me. Let me carry on this quote. We want something besides Sabbath religion. Now that knocked me for a 6. We need the living principle. What is that? I'm going to discuss that just now. Or maybe I'm going to ask you just now, what do you think this living principle is? Let me carry on reading. And to daily feel individual responsibility. This is shunned by many. And the fruit is carelessness, indifference, a lack of watchfulness, and spirituality. Where is the spirituality of the church? Where are men and women full of faith and the Holy Spirit? Remember the context of what she says here is that James is overloaded with work. Nobody is there to help him. It's a one-man business, this whole publishing business that he's starting up. And nobody is there to help them. And my prayer is, purify thy church, O God. For months I've enjoyed freedom, and I am determined to order my conversation, and all my ways are right before the Lord. And then I think this is the second last paragraph. Our enemies may triumph. And you will remember how they've been attacked by that pamphlet, etc. They may speak bitter words, and their tongue frame slander, deceit, and falsehood, yet will we not be moved. We know in whom we have believed. We have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. A reckoning day is coming when all will be judged according to the deeds done in the body. It is true, the world is dark. Opposition may wax strong, and trifler and the scorner may grow bold in his iniquity. Yet for all of this, we will not be moved, but lean upon the arm of the Almighty One for strength. God is sifting his people. He will have a clean and a holy church. We cannot read the heart of man, but the Lord has provided means to keep the church pure, etc., etc., etc. That, to quote to me, is just absolutely unbelievable. I was very, very impressed. Would any of you like to just give me your thoughts on what does she mean when she says we want something besides Sabbath religion and we need the living principle? What is that?
A daily walk.
A daily walk. Very good.
I think it means we need Christ more than anything.
Absolutely. And you both are right. Thank you very much for that contribution. The situation that, yes, please.
It's for me, having gone through some really difficult times in life where, actually every moment by moment is just practicing the presence of God and talking to him. And I remember a time of trial when I couldn't even make it literally 5 minutes at a time without God. And it's just focusing on Jesus and that living water for every 5 minutes, every minute, because there were times that I just lost hope in going forward. And, as that deer pants for water, that psalm, that is what it brought home to me. And then she also mentioned, as you showed earlier, on the desire for salvation. And one thing that I'll always remind myself, that not only is he my salvation, but our English language is a very poor language. Salvation includes deliverance from circumstances, deliverance from temptation, deliverance from so many things. So for me, I always, when I use the word salvation, I also claim the deliverance, from moment to moment.
Thank you, Teresa. May
I add something?
Yes, please.
This is Melinda. I would think that the principle would be that our will would line up with God's will, kind of like Enoch's in all that we do.
Say that again, Melinda. The principle?
That our will would line up with God's will in all that we do.
Oh, yes. Very, very good. By the way, Melinda, welcome. You from Michigan. I
Thank you.
Really appreciate that you are here.
Hi, Pastor Gideon. Good morning, everyone.
Hello, Vanya. Good morning.
For me, I will say her focus is on the salvation of souls. So she's not, of course, the Sabbath is important, but she wants to first achieve salvation for all, not for one group of people. And
No,
of course,
that was her passion.
the Sabbath will come because first we must know God and then love Him. And through love, we will obey His commandments.
Thank you, Vanya. Yeah, that was her passion. The text that came to my mind when I read that was Colossians 3, verses 23 and 24. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. Yes. That's the text that popped into my mind when I read that. This is more than just Sabbath keeping. This is more than just printing a pamphlet and getting a tract out. This is more than trying to bear the burdens of being slandered by the people that were trying to break them down. Then Romans 12 verse 2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. And that's exactly what one of you just said. What is good and acceptable and perfect. As Melinda said, we need to walk within the will of God. That's vitally, vitally important. And then Romans 8 verse 28 says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. And you've noticed in reading the last, let's say 20 or 30 pages of this volume 1, how even Ellen White doubted God. She doubted, why is there so much of a burden on us, and other people in this Advent movement don't have this burden? All the work is placed onto our shoulders. Is this fair? She asked the Lord. Really amazing. So all things work together for good. And every time they get dumped into depression by the poverty, by the situation that they find themselves in, that forces them onto their knees and forces them to communicate with God. And many times she and James cried. The tears were rolling down their faces while they were pleading and praying with the Lord and talking to him, communicating with him, trying to sort their own lives out and asking God to give them the assurance that he still loves them and is guiding them, and are they doing the right thing, etc., etc. So this Romans 8:28 to me is fantastic. All things work together for good. Even when God allows you to get into the crucible under those very difficult conditions, he allows that. If you look at Psalms 23, it says very clearly, I think it's verse 5 or 6, where God sets the table in the presence of your enemies.
Yes.
That's the crucible.
Mm.
And he does that for a specific purpose. And that purpose is to mold them. When you look at the last 100 pages that we've read of this volume, these people were beyond poor, beyond poor. There were times they couldn't even afford potatoes. They were eating turnips because it was cheaper. They had 6 and then later another 4 chairs that they bought, and not one of the chairs were the same. The last 4 they bought had no seats. I think they paid 62 cents or something for the 4 chairs with no seats. That must have been a lot of money in those days. Their dining room table were 2 empty barrels and a piece of wood on top. That was their dining room table. And when they received and earned, he was a laborer, cutting, doing the harvest for farmers and doing hard labor work. And when they received $10, he would not go and buy himself a bicycle. He would literally use that money to pay for the pamphlets. They would do that first before they put food on their own table. I never knew this. I've never read these first 100 pages before in my life. I've been astounded at the dedication of these two people and how hard they worked at getting this publishing business started, which eventually flourished. It only flourished when they moved to Michigan, and how dedicated they were. It's really absolutely amazing. Yeah, let's get back to, are there any of you that would like to share with us what portions of these 10 pages really impressed you? Please share that with us.
Gideon, can you still hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you, Teresa.
She spoke about the loss of 2 of their 4 children. Without going into details, just how God really comforted and came through for them. Now, I've lost, as you know, a child, and there was a time that my heart was really, pulled through really, really bad, and I was depressed and suicidal. And I've honestly, in spite of his loss, not to death, but to other stuff, but in spite of that complete loss and that cutting off of him completely, I've honestly got a place of peace today from God. So I can testify that God does take away that pain.
Yes, and they were coming to that themselves with losing those 2 children, which we read about just a little bit on further in this passage. Really amazing. Let me just get to that portion and share that with you.
But he really does give comfort.
Excuse me, Teresa.
God really is able to take the inconsolable and make it consolable and bring you to a place of peace.
Absolutely. Okay, let's carry on. The end of page 100, we see the messenger of truth, that tract that was really breaking them down and slandering them, etc. That folded completely. So that they scattered, the people that were writing and spreading, printing and spreading that pamphlet. So that eventually happened, which I think was a wonderful thing. It happened that when they moved to Michigan, they were supported financially, and James was able to pay the $2,000 or $3,000 debt he had. It doesn't say so, but I get the impression he bought a printing press and things like that, which he owed on, which was in their home in the lounge, which they used a portion of their home for a printing press. His illness was starting to restore gradually. His cough ceased, etc. The pain in his lungs disappeared. And then he was trying to get the church to take over the publishing business completely. I get the impression he would still like to be involved, but he wanted to get some of the responsibility shifted onto a committee. And this somehow did not work. Nobody accepted this proposal, and he carried on this work on his own, building up this publishing enterprise. But the enemies were there. They were injuring him. They were retarding the cause. And eventually, in 1861, there was the Seventh Adventist Publishing Association organized, which then assisted with the committee, etc., etc. So they had tremendous sacrifices. Can you imagine leaving your child with somebody for 5 years? Henry was there for 5 years. Edson was still a small little baby when he was given to somebody for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, I'm not sure. And she asked God, why do we have to go through this? Why is there so much load on our shoulders? Why aren't there other people that also feel impressed to work for the Lord and organize this movement into a church? Why is it only falling onto us? There's no equality, she asked God. We are overloaded with work, etc., and we can't even look after our children. This is not fair. So she really, once again, was talking to the Lord, and she says at the end of page 102, how she wishes that mothers who have the privilege of being with their children 24 hours a day would really prize the blessing that they have to be with their kids when the whites don't have that privilege at the moment. She talks about the way that they used to treat their children if they had to be disciplined, how they would first pray with them and then make sure the kid understands what this is all about, and that the child also understands that it would displeasure God if they did not address this, etc., etc. And then their little baby of 3 months of age died in December 1860, and then in 1863, Henry died at the age of 16, the oldest. I remember when I was at Elmshaven, I saw these photos there in the Ellen White home. That really, really impressed me, and that was a hard knock for them. Then in August 1865, James was stricken down with paralysis again. This is basically a stroke. That's what she means by that. And for 15 months, he could not work. He was inactive for 15 months. And this very much worried them. And she was very, very worried about her husband. And then the severest cold came into Michigan. I don't know if any of you have been to Michigan, but that weather comes over, and I think Melinda will be able to tell us, that weather comes over from the lake, from Canada, and over the lake, and brings that coldness right into that state. It's a very, very cold state to live in. And I get the impression that the whites almost did not have clothes, the way they were dedicating everything that was coming into the Lord. And this really had a very bad effect on James. But they kept saying, we've got a work to do. This is our priority. Satan was determined to ground them and to stop them in their work, and they were determined to do just the opposite. They were aware of precious souls out there that needed to hear the truth. And in fact, the words used on the beginning of page 104 is that they feared that precious souls would be lost by the delay, this delay of 15 months. And to remain longer from working from the field seemed to me worse than death. Now that to me is amazing, because they were so dedicated for their calling that to not go out and to evangelize and help those that are busy finding their feet as Christians and to make sure they have the right doctrinal understanding, to them that was worse than death. That to me is unbelievable. Does somebody want to make a comment there?
I have a thought. It makes me sad that the people of the church didn't want to share the burden. I mean,
Yes.
They were members of the church. They believed in that. They believed in the visions that she had received, and they were there. And it's just so sad to me.
It's very sad. And this is like 20 years into her calling, from around 1843. It's now around 1863, more or less. So it's only now the start of a group, which is not an organized church. It was organized in 1863 with the name Seventh-day Adventist. And that's where the name, the Seventh-day Adventist Publishing House, came from in 1861. That it's only now that they're actually receiving wider acceptance. That's the impression that I get. So it's very, very sad that this is all, for 20 years, they had to carry this burden. And this almost caused Ellen's death. This almost caused James' death a few times, etc., etc. Right, then they left. Yes.
I just want to mention that isn't this the story of everyone who is in ministry and everyone who wants to work for the Lord? You have conflicts within you. It's hardly the people out there in the world that opposes you. It's often those in the circle where you get the most rejection from, or the most
Resistance.
Yeah. And this is the story, and we have this privilege of reading this and also seeing how God came through and restored her in her health, because
Amanda, your voice disappeared.
Hi, am I back? Yes.
Your microphone was muted by accident. I noticed that.
Oh, okay. We should also take courage out of that and see how God actually restores Ellen out of that deep pit of fainting and being very sick, where God actually restores her back to the work that He had put out for her. And it was her will that she would carry on. And we need to, when we're in this difficult situations, take lessons from the life that she led. And when we get opposed, when we're busy with a project for God, you will always have the same trials to go through. And it does it can be so overwhelming that you feel like giving up. But as God came through for her, He will come through for you. We need to learn from this and look upon this, and not just look upon the pain and the suffering, but look how God came through. And yes, the extent of the suffering is severe, and it's not going to be easier for us. But the courage I'm taking out of this is the most important thing.
Thank you, Amanda. Every time that they land up in a depression state, when they're down in the dumps, and they pray earnestly, and they're crying, and they're praying 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times a day. I'll take an example. When he felt compelled to start writing the tracts, they were penniless. We discussed this yesterday, I think, or the day before. They were penniless. And she prayed and she received a vision. And God said to her, go ahead in faith and start writing the pamphlets. She had to give this information to her husband. When she discussed this with her husband, he started writing immediately without a cent. They were penniless. So the Lord wants us to put our toe in the water. When you get to the Red Sea, put your foot in the water, then the Red Sea will part. When you are convicted to write a pamphlet, then do it. Even if you are penniless, the Lord then provided afterwards. He wants you to take the leap of faith first. And every time when they were really in the dumps, God wanted them to learn through that experience, to go forward with stronger faith and to take the leap first, and then He will help them. He doesn't help them first. He wants them to do the first move, put their foot in the Red Sea, then the Red Sea will open. And I've seen this time and again the last 100 pages. And that is to me is the most important lesson that I personally have learned to date here, except the other point, which is God's work first, not me first. Those are the two things that have really impressed me greatly in what we've read. Teresa?
Yes. It's the passion and the zeal. It's a God-inspired passion and zeal. And that is what a calling is all about, is not giving up when the going gets tough, and just really having to fall to your knees every time, and just having that complete and utter dependence upon him for absolutely everything. And it's, look, I didn't walk their walk, but I've had a different walk of complete and utter dependence. And it's not an easy walk to enter, but I'm very glad that God took me along that walk and is still walking me that walk every day.
Thank you so much. Annie, you can unmute yourself. Annie, at the bottom of your phone, you can unmute your microphone there. While you're busy with that, Annie, can I ask Amanda to talk? Amanda?
Gideon, I actually also think that the question that all of us should ask ourselves, we're not just reading this because it's interesting. We really need to ask ourselves, what is my mission for this year? And put it out and follow this plan exactly like she did it. Don't use money as an excuse or anything else as an excuse. Look, where's your strong point? Look what you would like to do for the Lord this year and put that plan into action, and learn from this that it's going to be, it's not always going to be easy to get it going, but it is possible, and we need to press forward to do something this year that is different to last year. We can't carry on the way we carried on last year. This year is a new year. We need to do different things, and we need to make these lessons very practical in our lives.
Very good.
Amen.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Amanda.
Sorry, can I give a testimony? Can I give a testimony quickly?
Teresa, I
of
just
what
want to give
happened in the
Annie,
long-
I just want to give Annie an opportunity to come in. Annie, have you been able to mute your microphone? Maybe she's having a bad connection. Okay, Teresa.
Okay. As you may or may not know, there's a SDA, a medical missionary station in Gelukspruit in KZN, close to the Drakensberg. I've been going there quite frequently, well, as often as I can go, for Sabbath worship. Now, there's a young lady that I've got to know over time. She's 19 years old. She did her matric year last year. Her name is Tia. Tia comes from a very impoverished background, but she's got an enormous passion and zeal for the Lord. And God has given me an opportunity to be able to inspire and encourage this young lady in spite of very difficult financial circumstances and a very tough family situation. And they are starting their next course in February this year. And as you may or may not know, Ellen White in her writings does say that in the latter days, medical missionary work will become very important, and to a large extent, the only entry into people's homes to be able to spread the word of God. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yes.
And so Tia has been wanting to enroll on this course, and this course is 12,000 Rand. And I was hoping to be able to assist her financially, and the finances did not come through in time, and I was very, very disappointed. And she was disappointed because she's also got nothing to do, yet she's got this passion to go and do and the studying, etc., for this medical missionary work. And so I committed it to prayer with this young lady, and I spoke to the people who run the training there. And it's kind of long story short, we heard the night before last that she is being sponsored until my money comes through at a later stage. And she's got to enroll there on the 3rd of February. So I just want to say, where God makes a way, nobody can
Yes.
stop a person going into that. And I was just bowled over that sponsorship came forward, and then I can contribute later on.
Wonderful, Teresa. That's great. Okay, then they went to Battle Creek, and James was able to speak. He spoke for 1 hour, etc. He spoke for 40 minutes at another time, etc. So his strength was busy restoring. And Ellen White was very, very impressed with this, because they were afraid that the brain damage that James possibly had would have affected his speaking ability. And she felt that God's hand of restoration was obviously involved in this because of the stroke that he had. So they then went all over the states, including Texas in the south, California in the west, in the east, I should say, and in the west, excuse me. And then the publishing houses was moved to, also a second one was opened in California. Missions were started in England, Norway, and Switzerland. So this was the beginning of the Advent movement. I mean, today we've got 22 million people around the world that are members of the Adventist community, and we're in 215 countries. There's just a handful of countries that we're not in yet, like, for instance, North Korea, et cetera, et cetera. And at this point, this publishing house that started with an idea to write a tract developed into a point where they were distributing 140,000 copies of various periodicals that were now sent out monthly. So God's hand was in this work, and it was busy prospering like never before. This took 20 years to happen, of very hard and very dedicated work. So she writes at the end of page 104, the later history of my life would involve the history of various enterprises which have arisen among us, and with which my life work had been closely intermingled. For the uplifting of these institutions, my husband and I labored with pen and voice to notice even briefly the experience of these active and busy years would far exceed the limits of the sketch. Satan's efforts to hinder the work and to destroy the workmen have not ceased, but God has had a care for his servants and for his work. So they were very, very aware of God's hand in their lives, providing for them, getting the publishing work going, extending this outside of the American borders to England, Norway, Switzerland, etc. So things were really starting to happen. Any comments there? Any impressions that any of you have?
Just that verse, except the Lord lays the foundation stone, no man, nothing will prosper.
Yes. I just want to read what Annie wrote to us. She says, I cannot get my microphone to unmute. She will try and fix that later today. She just dawned on me their hospitality, although they had little, she says their home was like a hotel. Yes, very good point, Annie. Very, very good point. Then I want to read another one. I think that's from Vanya. She says, we need to learn and leave self-denial and sacrifice. Jesus says in Luke 9, verse 23, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily. So if we truly believe all scripture is given by inspiration of God, then it's not difficult to embrace that one of the primary principles of Christianity is self-denial. That's from Vanya, if I have my facts correctly. Right, I'm just looking. No, there's nothing else. The other points were mentioned. If I go back to the reading, page 106, The title of this one is The Death of Her Husband. This stroke caused paralysis. 3 times he had the strokes by the sounds of it. It looks like his left side was rather dead. And they worked together for 36 years. So this was quite a dedication from when they got married till now. They were questioning God again. Where were the others to help them in this work? It was too much for them. My life has been given to the upbuilding of these institutions. This is now James talking. It seems like death to leave them. So he could not leave the publishing business. They are as my children. I cannot separate my interests from them. These institutions are the Lord's instrumentalities to do a specific work. So they realize the importance of the publishing work. And even today, it's vitally, vitally important. And one of the sad things is if you look at the colporteur work in this country, I don't know about the States and other areas, but in this country, it's busy coming to a halt. It's really suffering. It's becoming a very difficult business to survive in as a colporteur nowadays. And the publishing work is what has actually established us. Can you imagine the beginnings of the Advent movement without that initial tract and what that led to, and all the other publishing that sprouted out of that initiative? So this publishing was really one of the most important tools that formed us into a church in 1863 as an organization. I would rather die than live to see these institutions mismanaged. So James was absolutely heart and soul dedicated to the success of the printing business, of the publishing business. And he was looking for the right man in the right place. He could never find that person. And they had all this opposition in the meantime to also contend with. So 3 times I've fallen and stricken with paralysis. Now that God has given me renewed physical and mental strength, I must see that the publishing work prospers. So there he's back on his feet after this 15 months of inactivity, and now they start traveling around, and they just absolutely, wherever they come, they just praise the Lord for their mercies, for his guiding hand, for healing James, etc., etc. And when troubles comes, he will give us grace to endure it. Then page 108, their motives have always been misjudged. And then he makes a statement here that he then remembered that Jesus as well went through very, very difficult times. And when I saw that, I read from the Bible, casting all your anxieties on him. That's 1 Peter 5, verse 7, because he cares for you. That's exactly what James and Ellen did. John 16, verse 33, I've said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So even though you and I go through difficult times, John 16, verse 33, the fact that Jesus has already overcome the Satan is a victory that we need to cling to. We know that we are from God and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. 1 John 5:19. Philippians 4, verse 6 and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ. So the other text that always comes to my mind whenever I'm in a difficult position, it's a text that many of us quote, is 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you that is common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. So if you look at Ellen and James White and the difficulties that they were in and were going through, Satan was busy attacking them. He did not want this church to be established. God was allowing it and he was allowing that which they could handle, that which they would lead them onto their knees, so that they would have a better communication and a deeper relationship with the Lord, so that they will grow out of that and become better instruments, better ambassadors for God.
Yes.
That's a very difficult text to quote in most instances. If somebody receives cancer or something like that, please don't quote that text. But once again, all things are allowed by God because he knows that we can handle it, and we should then be forced, like you can see that happened to the Whites. They were forced onto their knees, and then afterwards they praise God for the privilege they had of praying 3 times for James to be healed, because that led them closer to God.
I don't want to misunderstand you. I'm sorry. I don't want to
carry on,
misunderstand
Melinda.
you. Yes, thank you. I don't want to misunderstand you. The verse that you said you should not quote to people if they had a diagnosis, was that the 1 Corinthians verse, the 10:13?
1 Corinthians 10:13 is a tough one to quote for somebody that's really having a hard time, Melinda. I'm very careful to quote that if people are lying on their deathbeds or something like that.
What would you use to encourage them?
Well, can somebody help me with that answer? Vern, what would you use? How would you answer Melinda? I'd like some involvement here.
I've worked with people that have died.
Excuse me?
I have worked with dying people. And the way that I've worked with people is that Psalm 23 as well. He goes with me through the valley of the shadow of death. And I've been I've let them see, like Jesus wept. I've let them see that it affects me too. And sometimes words are not always the best, but holding hands and asking them if there are things that they would like to say, and letting them express themselves. It's a time for self-expression, not for us to express things really. And I've often asked them if I can record any wishes that they have, because they often struggle to tell family members, or family members will deny that they are dying. They don't want to face that reality. And I then ask them, are there any special wishes or thoughts that you would have known? And I let them share that. It's very important to let them share that. And I would write down things, and after people had passed on, I would pass those written messages on to the loved ones. That was a common practice.
Thank you,
That's very
Teresa.
nice.
I've had
really
the privilege.
nice, yeah.
Excuse
I'm
me?
sorry. I just said that is very nice.
Yes, I've had the privilege to be at quite a few people's deathbeds. And although I'm a trained theologian, I'm not trained in helping people to die. It's a very difficult thing. So the first time this happened to me, I was asked to come to the deathbed of a very good friend of mine's daughter, who went through a very difficult 18 months with cancer. And it took me half a day or so to prepare myself and to find materials. And I decided that I'm not going to use texts like, for instance, 1 Corinthians 10:13, but I'm going to do everything that's positive for that person as an Adventist. So I got hold of texts and typed them out and took that sheet with, and I actually gave that sheet to her when I left. And I was just sharing positive texts. And I also asked her, is there anything that she would like me to specifically pray for? Is there anything in her life that she feels might be a hindrance? Leonie, thank you. I will read that just now to everybody. Is there anything that is possibly a hindrance that I can assist her with to prepare her for death? And then I would tell her that I want you to realize that you might not see tomorrow. I want you to realize that this might be your last day on this earth, and then go into a positive mode and say, this is what the hope we have, etc., etc., etc. So that is how I sort of taught myself, and that worked very well. And subsequently, I've had the privilege to assist other people as well. So my approach, Melinda, is to be very positive with that person, be honest with that person, be honest with them in the position that they find themselves in. They might not see tomorrow. Is there anything I can help them with? Is there a message for somebody, as Teresa said, etc., that she would like me to convey to somebody else? And then just, as you say, just hold their hand, just be there for them, be warm, be friendly, etc., etc. Make sure that they have an opportunity to ask forgiveness. And if you need to carry that, convey that onto somebody on their behalf, then you're willing to do that. That's basically what I do, Melinda.
Praise God. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you got to be honest for the position they're in, and then be positive. Be as much positive as we possibly can. We've got a few minutes before we need to close off. I want to share with you the difficult circumstance texts that I found this morning to share with you. Very difficult. The whites had very difficult circumstances for these first 20, 25, 30, 36 years. 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 6 to 18. Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you. So no matter what your situation is, my friend, remember 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 16, 17, and 18. And just a summary of it is rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks for whatever circumstances you find yourself in, because God has allowed that to happen for a specific reason. We will not understand that then. We will understand that in the year after very clearly. James 1, verses 2 to 4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And you can see how Ellen and James White grew in their faith and became bigger instruments in the Lord's work, and started forming this church, this company, this group of Advent believers into a church. Hebrews 13, verse 5, through him let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God, that is the fruit of lips, and acknowledging his name. Under all conditions, we need to do that. Be anxious for nothing, Philippians 4, verse 6. But in everything by prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. So God allows these things. We are in this crucible. It takes massive heat to purify and get the gold to be removed from the rock. It's really the crucible. And we are in that crucible, and God allows that for a specific purpose, so that we can know the will of God and come out stronger, so that our faith can be steadfast, etc., etc. I thought I'll just share those 4 texts with you. 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 16 to 18, if you want to write them down. James 1, verses 2 to 4. Hebrews 13, verse 15, and Philippians 4, verse 6. Then also look at Isaiah 41, verse 10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. So no matter what situation you find yourself in, those are the 5 wonderful texts to be able to quote and use. And it's a good idea to possibly write those texts out and keep that in your handbag or in your purse or in your wallet, so that you can share those with others that you come across that are finding it difficult, or you can use them on yourselves from time to time. Okay, is there a last comment? I'm going to allow one more comment, then we need to close, and then we will, I need to close YouTube, and then we can have a private discussion after that.
May I say something, please?
Yes, thank you. Go right ahead.
So, what really impressed me is that they took their God-given responsibilities very, very serious. Be it preaching, be it sharing visions, be it soul winning, being the upbringing of their children, or writing books, or establishing printing houses. And my question is just, do we even know what our responsibilities are? What is it that God is expecting of us? And how serious are we with regards to just the whole, for a lack of a better word, the whole company of the church, the church in its whole, or our responsibilities at our local churches where we attend on, every Sabbath morning?
Thank you for that comment, Leonie. That's food for thought, no doubt. Shall we bow our heads in prayer, please? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this discussion. Thank you for the participants here this morning, and also those looking on YouTube now and later. Bless everyone as we expose ourselves to Ellen and James's very difficult situations that they found themselves in. But every time their strength their faith was strengthened, and they came out stronger. So Lord, whenever we find ourselves in difficult situations, may we remember the faith and the positiveness of Ellen and James White. May that be encouraging to us in our daily walk with you. We thank you for the privilege to be exposed to this in your name. Amen. Okay, let me just decline that call. Let me just close off the YouTube, and then if there's any person here that would like to say something, we can do that privately. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to the other side. And the same thing happened the other day. I couldn't get to the YouTube to kill it. Let me try again. Somehow I just lose YouTube, and then I can't stop the recording. Let me get into the section here to see if it's there. No.
Would it be helpful to share your screen, and maybe someone knows how to help you?
Yeah, I need help.
Well,
I need help.
Push the green button and we'll see what's on your screen and help you find your YouTube. You have a green button?
No, I don't have a green button.
Okay.
I don't know what a green button is.
It says where you can share the content of your screen.
No, I don't have that yet.
Okay.
Okay. What I'll be forced to do is close the session, and then we'll see each other again tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for being here today. Apologies, we can't have a private discussion thereafter, but I need to somehow get my act in order in connection with YouTube and how to stop that recording. But if I stop this one here now, then YouTube will be stopping automatically. So we'll see each other again